Hi everyone. The lesson is Classes and Objects Part 1 Introduction in Objective-C. Let's see what's inside the lesson. Tools used. We'll be using Xcode version 11.6 for practicals and Apple developer docs and API referencing. You need to complete this previous lesson in this series, which is Loops Part 1, before you do this. You will be learning about introduction to class and objects using Apple Developer Docs. The reason for using Apple Developer Docs is that's how real world developers would do their referencing. So this series is targeted to make you real world developers. So we'll be doing things exactly like that. We'll be doing practical demonstrations. Let's dig into the lesson and look what's inside that. So this is these are some Apple developer docs. So if you Google search, you will get these docs. So let's look into this section about programming with Objective-C. So Objective-C is it says it's a primary programming language to create software for OS X and iOS. OS X is the desktop version of the operating system. This iOS is the mobile for mobile development, mobile phones and mobile devices. So the course, this course is focused about developing iOS applications using Objective-C. So it says Objective-C is a superset of C language, right? And also in Objective-C it adds object-oriented capabilities, which is important thing to note down. So then Objective-C inherits syntax, the primitive types, flow control from C language. It's inheriting the basics from that. And additionally, Objective-C will give the syntax for defining classes and methods, meaning object-oriented programming. Okay, so this developer document introduces the Objective-C language, and it will discuss about creating classes, right, and custom objects. Also, how to work with some framework classes provided by Cocoa and Cocoa Touch. So this Cocoa and Cocoa Touch are frameworks, where meaning they are libraries, right? So this document talks about that. So for that, we should start with the chapters defining classes, which is this over here. So when you write software for OS X operating system and iOS, you'll be working with a lot of objects. So objects are just like other objects in any other object-oriented language, right? Okay. So classes are basically blueprints for objects. That is the basic concept in object-oriented programming. So classes describe the behavior and properties. So behaviors are methods, properties are data that are common to any particular object, type of object. That's the common theory. For example, a string object in Objective-C is an instance of NS string. So NS string is the class. So any object is of NS string is an instance of it. So it's a string. So which means if you need a string in Objective-C, you will be using the class NS string. Similarly, if you want to deal with numbers, there's a class called NS number, right? So if you look into this, if you Google search for NS string and NS number, you will see. So NS string is a class, as you can see, right? And so make sure when you look at the API that you select the language as Objective-C, because you got Swift language also. So this lecture series is focused on Objective-C. If you are interested about learning Swift, look at the other lecture series on Swift. You can see the descriptions of those, in the description sections. Okay, so and also when you look at the API, it says where this class is available. So it's available from iOS 2.0 plus, macOS, tvOS likewise, right? Then if you look at NS number, you will see the NS number is also a class in the Apple developer API. And also one important thing, you can see which framework this class belongs to. So for example, NS string belongs to Foundation framework. So in Apple, in iOS and macOS programming, Basically, the classes are inside grouped into frameworks. So for example, ns number is also a class in foundation framework. Keep in mind, not all the classes belong to foundation framework. There are some classes belonging to other frameworks. So that's something very important. So that ns string and ns number, they are standard or predefined classes. So it says in Objective C, the class interface specifies exactly how a given type of object is intended to be used by other objects. What does that mean? In other words, it defines public interface between instances of the class and the outside world. So what that means is interface. So if you look at ns string, if you look here, it's a class, but if you look at the declaration, it's declared as an interface ns string. So if you look at the ns number declaration, it's declared as interface. So this is the public interface the doc is talking here. So every class will have a class will have an interface, and it will specify how a given type of object intended to use by other objects. In other words, it defines the public interface between instances of the class and the outside world. So this interface will tell what methods, for example, what methods are available in this class for the public, for the outside world, right? Okay. So then classes inherit from other classes. That is common in object-oriented programming, right? For example, ns mutable string is inherited from ns string. Then there's always a root class which provides a basic functionality, right? So in Objective C, the root class, which vast majority of classes inherit, is called ns object. So ns object is one of the root classes where vast majority of the other classes are children, and the ns object class will have the common functionality, right? So if I look at the API for ns object, so if you see Objective C ns object, right, you will see, let's go into this. Let's open both of them. So okay, so let's select the language as Objective C. Okay, so this is the root class of most Objective C classes, right, from which subclasses inherit basic interface to the runtime system and the ability to behave as objects. So what it means is, so the ns object has the basic features, right, that every subclass will inherit as a basic interface to the runtime system and ability. So the Apple runtime system, the Mac OS or OS X or the iOS, the operating system expects every object to have some standard functions. So they are declared and they are defined in ns object. So that is why every object inherits from ns object, every class. So that those classes will have the methods such as initializing, loading, alloc. You will be seeing about these things: init, copy, right, deallocation, new, right? So these are standard methods which the runtime, when I say runtime, is the operating system. So the operating system expects these to have. So they all comes from the base class ns object. So that is what which is said here, right? So this inheritance hierarchy can go into deep. For example, UI button is a class. Its parent is UI control. Then its parent can be, say, another class. In this case, UI view. Its parent is UI responder, and the topmost class is NS object. So one other thing, when you are looking at the developer docs, you don't have to read word by word, right? So it's not how you use developer docs. So if you are reading a developer doc, you don't read entire thing. You just move your eyes and find important points. That is what I'm doing at the moment with all of you. So I'm moving my eyes and explaining you the important things. So when you experience, you will also get that skill of just moving your eyes and finding out only the important stuff. So once again, I'm telling you, you don't have to read every single word, right? Then the interface for a class defines expected interactions. Now you saw a little while ago that every class is declared as an interface, which is the public interface for the outside world, right? Okay. So then it declares the methods for where outside uh, uh, world or the other classes will be using. So when you say these methods and stuff like that, it's things like what you declare inside the interface is things like properties, then the methods, you declare them over here. Then you got a basic syntax in Objective C for declaring interface, which is at interface. So this is the syntax where you declare a class at interface, right? Likewise. So then you declare a class, right? Using it. So let's try this now. Let's do a practical uh, to check this. Now, now before the practical, there's a couple of important things. Now, so now this is the interface. For example, a class called person, and then here what it declares is properties. So we'll talk about them. So properties are used to store data, right? Now, once you declare properties, now I'm just giving you the overall idea. So first listen to this carefully and let's do the practical after that. But before we do the practical, listen to this important point. So things like properties. In the interface, when you have properties, the properties are used to store data and properties are public. So when you declare properties, you can give extra attributes. We'll talk about them in the next few lessons, right? So first I'm moving my eyes just to show you some important things. Then method declarations. So you can declare methods, right? Let's also see that in another lesson after this. You can declare parameters. We will be looking at all that, right? Class names must be unique. Okay, and then after the interface, then you have to make sure you give an implementation for a class. That's another file. So the interface is declared, let us say, in one file, and let us say the implementation can be declared in another file. So in that file where you declare the implementation, what you do is you import the header file where you have declared that earlier interface. For example, this person interface can be declared in a file called xyzperson.h. In that case, you have to say import xyzperson.h in the implementation file. And the implementation file, you can save it as say xyzperson.m, right? Anyhow, in the interface implementation, okay, so for example, if the interface of xyzperson had a method called say hello, then in the implementation you will give the body for the method. So the interface will have only the signature of the method, then the implementation will have the body of the method. So that is the concept. Okay, then it says Objective-C classes are also objects. What does that mean? So what it means is it says in Objective-C a class is itself an object of a type called class. So to summarize this, what it means is, okay, in object orientation, the concept is you first create a class, then you create an object or instance. That's still here. In addition to that, you can also consider a class also as an object, and it says typical use for a class method is a factory method. In other words, in a class, we'll be doing it in future in other lessons, you can declare two types of methods, instance methods and class methods. So if you have a class method, they are like factory methods, which means you can use them as alternative to object allocation and initialization. So we'll talk about that in the coming lessons, but I'm just giving you the overall idea, right? Now the next thing is, once you declare the interface and the class, then you have to instantiate object, or you have to create object, right? So for that you have to this is another document, you have to do object allocation, right? So object allocation means it has to allocate memory for whenever you create object. So once you declare a class, whenever you want to allocate or create object, you have to call a method called alloc. That is the theory. So if I open the alloc method, you will see it is not only alloc, then after allocating you have to call the init method. That is how you create an object, which we will show you in the next practical, right? So anyhow, you have to allocate memory, right? And then you have to initialize it. That is the theory. So then you have to call init method. That is the theory. So once you allocate, then you have to call the init method on the allocated object. So that is the theory behind declaring a class. So now you got some overall idea, and let's do the practical. But just before that, this is the syntax for you to create object of a class. So this will be the class. For example, it can be the hello class, or in this case it is the xyz person class. So if you got the xyz person class, then you will be putting xyz person, then alloc, then you will be initializing, then you stop. So now you got an overall idea of the basics of classes. Not only that, you got an idea about how to refer the API, and also you got to know that NS object is the parent class. So now with that theoretical understanding, we can go and do some practicals, right? But let's look into this first. So the lesson plan is practical demonstrations, which is going to be in the next lesson. Conclusion, you learn about classes and objects using the Apple Developer Docs. We use Apple Developer Docs and API for referencing. Have a look at our other videos for practicals on Objective-C A to Z. So we are very excited to take you to the next lesson, which we will be doing the practical of classes and objects. So let's meet in the next lesson. See you until that.